Hey, happy Saturday, everybody. I'm with you again, looking at the poetical books of the Old Testament. Today we're going to talk about Ecclesiastes. But before I do, I forgot to read one of my favorite scriptures from Proverbs last week, chapter 31 and verses, let me see here, where was it? Chapter 30, actually it's chapter 30 and verses 7, 8, and 9. It says, "Two things I asked of you, do not refuse me before I die. Keep deception and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is my portion, that I not be full and deny you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Or that I not be in want and steal and profane the name of my God." I think that's a pretty good balance there when it comes to possessions, wealth, money, these kinds of things, that Agur, one of the writers of Proverbs, says here, that give me neither poverty nor riches, feed me with the food that is my portion. Just wanted to share that, and then we're going to get into Ecclesiastes today. And we said last week, Solomon, who wrote Proverbs, also writes Ecclesiastes. Now, even though he's not named in this book, look at chapter 1, verse 1. He says, "The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem." David didn't have any other kings or sons rather, who were kings, so it's got to be Solomon. And I think I said last week too, at the end of Proverbs, when he's writing Proverbs, he's very, very good. He's in right relationship with God. Wisest man, God appears to him a few times, and he is right on his game. However, later, as in his monarchy, he is attracted to foreign women and accumulates many wives and concubines who are foreigners, and they are basically into demonic gods, idols. Solomon is enticed with that, so he's not only an adulterer, he's an idolater, and I believe there were several decades in his life when he was out of fellowship with God, and this is when he writes Ecclesiastes. Toward the end of the book, as we'll see, he comes around, but probably at least a couple of decades, he's out of relationship with the Lord, out of covenant. So the book portrays Christ, the end of all living. Christ, the end of all living. And it's kind of like the soul's autobiography. The key word and the key verse together, chapter 2, verse 11. Solomon writes, "Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity, and striving after wind, and there was no profit under the sun." Vanity, meaningless, unfulfilled. This book portrays the human philosophy of life with human thinking, a natural religion thrown in there as well, trying to discover the meaning of life. How many times have we heard people say things like, who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? The answers to life is what people are looking for. And that can only really be found in a relationship with Jesus Christ. Solomon is outside of that right now. And the whole book here is a collection of man's arguments at variance with the Bible. It's kind of like his experiences and reflections while he is out of fellowship with God. Now, you might think, well, doesn't he know this? Can he return, repent, make himself right with God? Here's my opinion on that. When a person gives himself over to demonic entities, which Solomon has done with his foreign wives, your mind becomes confused, doubtful, you're oppressed, you're not thinking right. A lot of other things as well. So I think for that time in his life, which could have been about 20 years, he is messed up, if I can use the vernacular of today. So eventually, he does come around. But for a period of time, when he is giving himself to these foreign gods, foreign women, he is in the bottom of the pit and really is not able to climb out. So that's my opinion as to why it just wasn't a quick turnaround for him. The word Ecclesiastes means to assemble. You might see the word ecclesia in here, which is the Greek word for congregation or church. This book was spoken by Solomon to an assembly of people that were gathered together. And he calls himself the preacher, or better yet, a translation, teacher. And there's a Hebrew word for this I wanted to throw at you, if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Qoheleth. 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 And it's written around the 10th century BC when scholars and theologians have attributed this letter to be. So the division of the book, in chapter 1, he starts talking about the futility of wisdom. Basically, he's philosophizing here. Throw a little science in there as well. He says all this is vain. In chapter 2, which is interesting, he goes the pleasure route. I said to myself, come now, I'll test you with pleasure, verse 1. So enjoy yourself, and behold, it too is futility. I said of laughter, it is madness. And of pleasure, what does it accomplish? You got to remember, in antiquity, and all the way up into medieval times, kings would have what we'd call court jesters come before him to entertain him, clowns, if you will, funny stories, jokes, trying to, entertain a monarch. And yet, nothing works for Solomon here. He says, it's foolishness. In verse 3, I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine. So he tries alcohol. While my mind was guiding me wisely, I don't think so. And how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of their lives. So he gets into alcohol, thinking that's going to give him meaning and purpose in life. A lot of people do that today. I don't know if they're looking for answers in a bottle, but usually they do it excessively to escape reality, some bad situations in their lives, whatever. All right, and then in verse 4, he goes a different route. He says, I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself, made gardens and parks, and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. So what is he doing here? Building houses for himself, which probably led him to materialism. You got a big house, nice, roomy, you want to fill it with the stuff. So that's what he does. That doesn't satisfy. He goes into landscaping, gardening, vine dressing, all these kinds of things. They might, give him some pleasure for a while, but eventually that wears off. And then look at 7. I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves. Also, I possessed flocks and herds larger than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. He gets into the livestock business. I collected for myself silver, gold, treasure of kings and provinces, provided for myself male and female singers. He gets into the arts here. Music, probably choruses or orchestra, something like that. And the pleasures of men, many concubines, always coming back to the sexual. All this is vanity, foolishness, meaningless. Nothing new under the sun here. People have been trying to do these things and fulfill a vacuum, a gap in their lives to no avail. So this is what he's doing. And then, getting into chapter 3, he goes the fatalistic route. You ever hear the expression, que sera, sera? Whatever will be, will be. So he's just kind of weary of living life. It becomes survival, very mundane. And then also in chapter 3, look at this in verse 19. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts, animals, is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, they all have the same breath, and there's no advantage for man over beast. All is vanity. So what's his conclusion here? 22. I've seen that nothing is better than that man should be happy in his activities, for that is his lot. For who will bring him to see what will occur after him? Trying to peek into the future here a little bit. So none of that is fulfilling as well. In chapter 4, he gets more back into philosophy. Some of these things appear on the surface to be wise sayings, but they don't come from the Spirit of God. Chapter 5, formal religion, again, and also money and wealth. He returns to this in verses 10 and 11. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. This too is vanity. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. So what's the advantage to their owners except to look on? The more you have, the more you want. Isn't that true? We can't be content, as it says in Proverbs 30. We want more. We become excessive with wealth. And then we get paranoid with all these cameras and security devices thinking someone's going to rip us off. So this is where he's at. Paul picks up on this in 1 Timothy 6, verse 10, I believe it is. The love of money, not money, but the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some, by longing for it, have pierced themselves with many griefs. So money is not the answer to life. You can't be fulfilled, satisfied with money or the things money and wealth bring you. Then the turning point. Chapter 7, he tries a reputation of being a moral person. That also is not sufficing him, although it's beginning to turn him a little bit more toward the Lord. Chapter 8 is a key one. He's kind of coming full circle here a little bit, talking about obeying rulers. He gives references to God, an admonition, seek the Lord, fear the Lord, these kinds of things. He's not quite back yet. However, he's starting to look up rather than down. And then in chapter 9, he talks about men being in the hands of God. He sees the dissatisfaction among people, the poor, the rich, the learned, the ignorant, and he is saying use caution instead of rashness, which is what he did. Solomon was an extremist. He'd get into all kinds of things, exhaust them, and then discard them, and onto something else. And the cycle was repeated over and over again. That's what this book's all about. Trying to fill your life with stuff rather than a relationship with God, a substitute, an alternative. And remember, he's backslidden. He's not in covenant with God. So at the end of the book, look at chapter 12. He comes to this conclusion, verses 13 and 14. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God, keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it's good or evil. So he's saying enjoy life, but with tempering it with a reverence for God. Communicate wisdom to other people. Have a proper reverence for God in all of life. The heart attitude is more important than the public actions. And remember, Solomon was definitely a public person. So life apart from God is futile. He longed to know more of the answers to the puzzles of life. And he's basically coming to the conclusion, find joy in the everyday experiences of life. This book belongs to the Hebrew wisdom, and as I said, it's addressed to the gathering of people. Solomon is seeking answers about the future. But how many of you know the future, many times, is not meant to be known? God withholds that from us. Why? Well, if we knew everything that was going to happen to us in our future, it would eliminate faith. We wouldn't be dependent upon the Lord because we'd know what's going to happen. You'd be being led by your own faculties. So faith would be eliminated. Our hearts could easily get corrupted because we think we know everything that is needing to be known. Some people live in the past backward, if only those days were upon us again. They've written songs about that. Other people are always looking into the future. Yeah, they might be visionary, but where is the present? Enjoy the present. And that's what Solomon, in his repentant state, coming back to the Lord, begins to write about. So he's affirming that we need to have a vigorous and joyful engagement in life. Don't overlook the present by looking too far ahead or living in the past. Enjoy the everyday experiences of life. So this is Ecclesiastes, a very paradoxical book. Some people take this and devour it in a sense where they think God is really speaking to them through it. And he may. I'm not saying he can't. It's scripture. However, realize that a lot of what is being said, and especially in the first half or even a little bit more of the book, it's Solomon, his collection of experiences, his reflections on being out of fellowship, out of covenant with God. So I would be careful about any kind of guidance you're getting from Ecclesiastes, especially the first half of the book. All right, so that's my sharing of Ecclesiastes with you today. Hope you enjoyed that. Next week, we will conclude the poetical books with equally a book that is, known for its interestedness, paradoxical, controversy even, the Song of Solomon, which is also called the Song of Songs and the Canticles. So we'll see you next week with that particular book.